The bell above Roseline Coffee chimed at 11:47 p.m., and I knew, the way you know weather is about to break, that the man walking in had not come for espresso. He didn't shake snow from his shoulders. He didn't pull off his gloves. He stood at the threshold like the threshold belonged to him, and behind him, two more men positioned themselves at the windows with the unhurried patience of people who had done this many times before. My hands were inside the steamer pitcher. Milk hissed. I shut it off. Behind the counter, taped to the register, was a sticky note in my own handwriting. Rent due Tuesday. The shop was empty except for me and a man asleep over a sketchbook in the corner, and the closing playlist was playing some old Sinatra song my aunt used to hum while she cooked. The irony of that, Sinatra, of all things, on the night the world came for me, would not occur to me until much later. "Eleanor Vance?" the man asked. He was in his 40s, square-jawed, and his Italian was the kind that had been carried into the second generation like a family heirloom, clipped, accent only at the edges. "We're closed," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm aware." He stepped to the counter. He did not lay his hands on it. "Mr. Marchetti would like a word." I had heard the name. Anyone who lived in this city long enough heard the name. The Marchettis were the kind of old money that wasn't really money, but blood with interest accruing on it. The bartender at the place across the street had once told me, half laughing over a beer, that the Marchettis own the night the way other families own shipping lines. I had laughed too. I had stopped laughing now. I wiped my hands on the apron at my waist and tried to look bored, the way I had practiced in a mirror at 15 when boys started saying my name in the hallway like a question. "Then he can come during business hours." "Eleanor," just that. The man's voice didn't rise. It pressed instead the way a thumb tests a peach for ripeness. "Get your coat." I should have run. I had run from less in my life. The back door of Roseline opened into an alley, and the alley opened into Wells Street, and Wells Street at 11:47 on a Tuesday was full of cabs. I could have made it. I have asked myself many times since why I did not. I think the answer is that I was tired in a way that goes past bone, and the rent on my aunt's apartment was overdue, and I had counted the change in the tip jar twice tonight and come up short, and the truth, the small, bitter, accurate truth, was that part of me was almost relieved. Not at this. Not at men with guns under their coats, but at the idea of something happening. Anything after the long, flat year of nothing, so I unhooked the apron. I fetched my coat from the back. I did not call the police, because I had grown up the kind of girl who knew the police would not come fast enough. The car waiting at the curb was matte black and lower than any car had a right to be in a winter like this. The man held the back door for me. I sat. The leather smelled like cedar and money. The driver did not look at me. The man with the square jaw closed the door, got in beside me, and I watched the city of Chicago slide past the tinted glass like a film I had wandered into without buying a ticket. We did not stop at any of the addresses I might have guessed. We crossed the river. We climbed an underground ramp into a parking structure beneath a building that had no name on its signage, only an address etched small into the granite. An elevator that asked for no floor took us all the way up. The doors opened, and I stepped out into a penthouse that took up the entire crown of the building, and there, with his back to me, looking out over a Chicago made of light and snow, stood the man whose name had become the noise in my chest. He turned. I had imagined him older. The men I'd met downstairs were older. Dante Marchetti was 32, maybe 33, with the kind of face you would have once described as devastating before realizing the word was not figurative. His suit was charcoal. His shirt was white. There was a thin scar that ran from beneath his left ear down into his collar, the way a small road runs into a town you don't visit. His eyes were not black. They were the color of espresso held up to a lamp. He looked at me. He looked at me for what felt like a year, and I felt it, the recognition, though I did not know it was recognition then. The way his face moved through 3 or 4 different expressions before settling, finally, on a stillness so total it seemed studied. "Miss Vance," he said. His voice was lower than I had braced for and softer, like he had decided not to use the full instrument. "Do you know why you're here?" "No." "Yes," he corrected gently and walked toward me and stopped within reach and did not reach. "You know exactly. You have just decided not to know it yet." He held out a folder. I took it. The first page was a photograph of my father. The second was a number, $3 million, in clean black type. The third was a contract, signed in a dead man's hand. I looked up. He was watching me with an expression I would later spend nights trying to name. "Your father owed me $3 million when he died." Dante Marchetti said. "And tonight, Miss Vance, I have come to collect." I had been raised by my aunt because my father had drunk himself into a stairwell when I was 11 and my mother had died of, the doctors said, complications of grief 2 years before that. They had used the word loosely. I had long suspected my mother died of complications of being married to my father. I had not in any of the years since suspected that my father had owed $3 million to a Mafia family. The folder shook in my hands. He noticed. He did not take it back. "Sit," he said. There was a low couch behind me, the color of unsalted butter. I sat. He did not. He stood at the window, half-turned, so I could look at him without having to look at him. I would learn later that he did this on purpose, that he had learned somewhere in his life that women who had been hunted needed to be allowed to study a man before being studied by him. But that was later. In the moment, what I felt was not gratitude for the courtesy. What I felt was the thing every woman feels in a room with a man who has not yet decided what he will do with her, and who does not need to decide quickly, because the room is his. My pulse was in my throat. My hands had gone cold inside my coat sleeves. I looked at the door I had come in by, and I located by instinct the second exit, a service door at the far end of the room, and I noted with a small, precise calm that surprised me that there was no way I could reach either before the man at the elevator reached me. I was 23 years old. I weighed 115 pounds. He was, I judged, 6'2". The men outside the room were all armed. The math was simple. The math was very simple. "I don't have $3 million, I said. "I am aware of that. I work at a coffee shop. I am aware of that, too. I just turned 23. "Yes." His voice had not changed. The patience in it was almost cruel. "And so we come to the question of how you intend to repay this debt." I laughed. It was the wrong laugh. It came out cracked. "There is no how. You should call the bank, sue his estate, sue me, whatever it is your kind of people do." "My kind of people," he said, and now there was something very faintly amused at the corner of his mouth. "Do not call banks." He turned fully, and the light from the city outlined him from behind so that for a moment he looked less like a man and more like the silhouette of one. "Eleanor." It was the first time he had used my first name. He said it like he had been saving it. "I am not going to harm you. Look at me, please." I looked. His eyes were perfectly steady. "I am not going to harm you," he repeated, "but I am also not going to let you walk out of this building. Not tonight and not for a long while after. Your father's debt has been called by men who will not be as polite as I am. They came to your aunt's apartment last week. Did she tell you?" My aunt had told me her sciatica was acting up. My aunt had told me to come stay with her for a few days, and I had said I couldn't because of work. I felt the room tilt. "She's safe," he said immediately, reading me the way someone reads a familiar book. "I have someone with her. She thinks he's a meter reader from the gas company. He has been there for 6 days. He will be there for as long as I require." He stepped closer. He did not touch me. He never, in those first hours, touched me, and I would understand later that this was deliberate, was the discipline of a man who had grown up watching men touch women badly and had decided to be different on principle. But discipline is not the same as safety. I was aware, the entire time he stood within reach, of how easily he could close the distance. I was aware of my own breath. I was aware that there was something in the way he looked at me that did not match the words he was saying, that the words were measured and bureaucratic and the look was not, and the dissonance of it made my skin prickle in a way I could not name. "You will stay here," he said. "You will be safe here. You will work off your father's debt, and when it is done, you will walk out of my life and never see me again. Those are the terms. Work it off how?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. He looked for a half-second, almost insulted. "Not that. Then how? There are things in my life I cannot trust to the men who work for me," he said. "There are letters I cannot dictate. There are accounts I cannot have read. There are rooms in this house I cannot have entered by anyone whose loyalty I have purchased. I need a person who is in this for one reason and one reason only, survival. Yours. You want a secretary. I want someone who has nothing to gain by lying to me." His eyes held mine. "I will pay down 100,000 of your father's debt for every month you stay. In 30 months you will be free. In the meantime, you will not be touched, you will not be threatened, you will not be lonely if you do not wish to be lonely, and He stopped. He took, I noticed, a breath. "I will handle you," he said quietly, "in a way no one ever did, and you will crave me more than the life you came from. That is not a threat, Eleanor. That is a promise." I sat very still. The folder was warm in my hands now. The line he had just spoken sat in the air between us, and I did not know, I genuinely did not know, that first night, whether the line was a promise of safety or a promise of something else, and the not knowing was a thing that lived in me after for many weeks. The city behind him was throwing a slow kind of light up from the river, and the snow was still falling, and somewhere in this building, a heater clicked on with a small domestic sigh. "Why?" I said, finally. "Why? Why you? Why this? Why are you not just taking me down to a basement somewhere?" He looked at me a long, long moment. He said, "Because I knew your mother." Then he turned, and he left the room, and a woman with kind eyes and a Polish accent named Marta showed me to a bedroom the size of my aunt's whole apartment. And I lay down on a bed that smelled of clean linen and lavender, and I did not sleep, and I did not cry, and I held that one sentence in both hands like something alive. He had known my mother. I lay awake for hours. I tried the door once, around 3 a.m, just to see. It was unlocked. I stood in the doorway in bare feet and a borrowed nightgown and looked down a long, dim hallway lit only by the floor lamps the cleaning staff left burning. And I understood, then, what kind of cage this was, the worst kind, the kind that does not need a lock, because the door is open and the floor outside is the sky. Whatever Dante Marchetti was going to do to me, he was going to do it slowly, and he was going to do it with my consent, and I was going to give it to him because he had said one sentence, because I knew your mother, and that one sentence had made me, against every survival instinct I had, want to stay. I closed the door. I went back to bed. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, I started to count, in a small voice in my head, the months until I was free. The house, for it was a house, even if it sat on top of the city like a crown, had rules. Marta brought breakfast at 8, lunch at noon, dinner at 7. Dante was rarely there for any of them. 3 rooms were locked, the one at the end of the East Hall, the one beside the library, and the one whose door I never even saw because the corridor that contained it required a code I was not given. The library, however, was open. The kitchen was open. The terrace, with its low wall and its impossibly long view, was open, and on the 3rd morning I stood out on it in the cold without a coat and listened to the city wake up below me and tried to feel like a prisoner and could not. There is a particular indignity to being kept somewhere lovely. I saw him for the first time after the first night on the 2nd day, by accident. I had wandered into a corridor I had not meant to wander into, and there was a half-open door, and inside the door was a small room with a single chair, and in the chair was a man I had never seen, and standing in front of him was Dante. The man in the chair had a black eye. His lip was split. His hands were cuffed behind him to the chair, and he was not, I will say this, frightened. He was past frightened. He was in the deep numb place beyond frightened, where men who have been taken go when they understand what is going to happen to them next. Dante was speaking to him in Italian, quietly, almost gently. And then Dante stopped speaking, and he moved his hand once, just a small clean motion, and the man in the chair made a sound I will not describe, and I took a half step back into the hallway, and Dante's eyes, without him turning his head, found mine in the gap of the door and held them. He did not stop what he was doing. He did not, for a single second, look surprised that I had seen him. He merely held my eyes for the length of one breath, and then he went back to speaking to the man in Italian, and someone, a man I had never seen in a black sweater, closed the door from inside gently, and I stood in the corridor with my hand against the wall for a long time before I could walk back to the library. I did not eat lunch. I did not eat dinner. Marta came at 7 and asked if I was ill. I said yes. She brought broth. She did not press. At 9, I was sitting in the dark in the library when the door opened and he came in. He did not turn on the light. He came and sat in the chair across from me, and the city light through the window made his face into a half-face. "You saw," he said. "Yes. I am sorry that you saw. Are you?" He let out a breath. It was not quite a laugh. It was the sound of a man recognizing that he had been caught at something. "No," he said. "I am not sorry that I did it. I am sorry that you saw it." "They are not the same thing. I want you to know they are not." Who was he? A man who was paid by people you do not yet know about to come into this house and shoot the woman who is sitting on this couch. I went still. Tonight, he thought tonight, he was wrong. Is he? I could not finish. "He is alive," Dante said. "He will eventually walk out of this building. He will not, however, be able to do certain things again, and one of them is hold a gun." "I am sorry, Eleanor, that this is the kind of house you are in. I will not pretend that it is not. But I want you to understand that what you saw was not done because I enjoy doing it. It was done because a man was sent to kill you, and I needed him to tell me very precisely who sent him, and there is no version of that conversation that ends with me asking him politely. Do you understand? I did. I did, and I did not, and the not understanding was the worst part. Because what I felt, sitting across from him in the dark, was not horror, although I felt horror and not gratitude, although I felt gratitude, but a third thing I had not braced for, a thing that lived between horror and gratitude and was its own thing entirely. He had hurt a man for me. He had hurt a man today to keep me alive. And the part of me that had been raised in a small kitchen by a careful aunt and had memorized the rules of being a good girl was screaming at the part of me that was, despite itself, looking at him in the dark and thinking thank you. I did not know which of those parts of me was real. I have since come to believe both were. Eleanor. Yes. Look at me. I looked. If you want to leave, he said, now is the moment. I will have a car downstairs in 8 minutes. I will have a house in Vermont open to you by morning. I will not stop you. I will not contact you. You have seen the worst of what I am tonight, and if it is too much, I would rather you go now than lie to me for 30 months and leave at the end of them having decided in your heart that I was a monster all along. I thought about it. I thought about it for longer than I would later admit to him. I am not leaving, I said. He closed his eyes. Then go to bed, Eleanor, please. And tomorrow we will start over. I went. I did not sleep, but somewhere around 4 in the morning I realized that my pulse when I thought of him did not race the way it had on the first night. It did something else. It steadied. The way a pulse steadies when a body has decided, against the better judgment of its mind, that it is not in danger. I sat up in the bed. I said, out loud to the empty room, Eleanor, he cuffed a man to a chair tonight. Eleanor, you are losing your mind. The empty room did not answer. The snow outside the window did not stop falling. And I lay back down and I did not run, and that was the night, I see it now, looking back, that the cage stopped having walls and started having a name. He came to me on the 4th night. I was in the library. He was not dressed for company. His jacket was off, his shirt sleeves were rolled to the forearm, and there was, on the inside of his right wrist, a small black tattoo I had not noticed before, a number, not a name. He saw me see it. He did not pull the sleeve back down. You were supposed to start work today, he said. No one told me what work. I forgot to tell Marta. He sat, not beside me, across. There was a chess set between us. He did not pick up a piece. My mother kept letters, he said. She kept every letter anyone ever wrote her. She died 8 years ago, and her letters are in a room upstairs in 12 boxes, and I have not been able to open them. I want them sorted. I want them read. I want a list of who wrote her and what they said, and which ones I should keep and which ones I should burn. That is your first job. I thought about this. You want me to read your mother's mail? Yes. Why me? He looked at me a long time. Because I cannot do it myself, he said, and I cannot have a stranger do it. And you, Eleanor, are the closest thing in this house to a person I do not yet have a reason to fear. It was not a compliment. He did not say it like a compliment. He said it like a problem he was admitting out loud, and somehow that was the thing, that small admission, that crack in his iron, that did the first damage. I tried for a while to dislike him. He made it difficult. Not because he was kind, he was not kind, not in the small daily sense. He did not bring me flowers, and he did not ask me how I had slept, and he did not, when we passed in the hallway, make small talk. But he was, in a way I had not braced for, attentive. He noticed that I did not eat the cucumbers in my salad, and within 3 days the salads no longer contained cucumbers, and no one had told Marta to make this change. He noticed that I read at night, and the lamp in the library was upgraded to one with a softer bulb. He noticed that I had begun to pace, sometimes restlessly between rooms, and on the 11th day a small key appeared on my nightstand with a note in his handwriting that said, Roof. I would tell you, if I were being polite, that the noticing was what undid me. It was not. What undid me was smaller than that. What undid me was the morning, 14 days in, when I came down to the kitchen and found him standing at the counter in a shirt that had not been ironed, with his hair still wet from a shower, pouring coffee from a French press for one. He had not heard me come in. He stood there alone in his own kitchen at 6 in the morning, and he poured the coffee, and he tasted it, and he made, it was the smallest thing, a small face of disapproval at the strength of it, and added more cream and tasted again, and his shoulders, when he was alone like that, fell 2 inches lower than I had ever seen them fall. He looked in that moment like a man. Not a Marchetti, not the silhouette in the window. A man. And I stood in the doorway in a borrowed sweater with my hair in a knot, and I felt, there is no other word for it, I felt my chest go warm in a way that had nothing to do with the coffee, and I understood, with the small, clean horror you understand things at 6 in the morning, that I was in trouble. I worked all the next day in a room that smelled of cedar and old paper. I sat on a rug that had been woven in the 1800s and read a dead woman's correspondence, and his mother had been, I learned by sundown, a woman of staggering wit who wrote back in pencil on the margins of every letter she received as if having a conversation with the world. By the 7th letter, I was laughing. By the 20th, I was crying. By the 40th, I had begun to understand the shape of the boy who had been her son. I started, without meaning to look for him in the letters. I found him. He was in the margins. He was the small note she had written in 1998 in the corner of a letter from her sister. D has been crying again. He thinks I do not hear. He was in the note from 2001. D is becoming his father. I will not allow it. He was in the note from 2009, the year she died. D is a good man. He does not know it yet. I will tell him as often as I can in the time I have left. I read those notes and I cried alone on a rug in a stranger's house, for a boy I had never met who had grown into the man whose coffee I had watched him pour. He came to the doorway at midnight. I had not heard him. He stood there a long moment before I noticed, and when I did notice, he did not apologize for watching. She liked you already, I said, lifting a letter. She had not met me. She wrote to a friend that she had heard of an Eleanor Vance, the daughter of a woman named Sophia, and that she hoped one day to. I stopped. He had gone very, very still. Sophia, he said, my mother. His face, for one unguarded second, did something I did not see again for many weeks. Then it closed the way an iron gate closes, not slammed, but pulled with great care until it locked. Yes, he said. Sophia, he nodded once. Eat, sleep, continue tomorrow. He left. I sat on the rug a long time after with his mother's handwriting in my lap, and I knew without being able to prove it, that this man had not brought me into his house to collect a debt. Or he had. But the debt was not the one in the folder. I went to my room. I did not turn on the light. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and I tried, for what was probably the 10th time that week, to remember why I was supposed to want to leave. I tried to remember the apartment. I tried to remember the coffee shop. I tried to remember the stairwell my father had died in, and the bus I had ridden home from school for 10 years past it, and the small specific exhaustion of being a girl whom no one had ever, in any meaningful way, looked at the way the man down the hall looked at me. The list in my head was short. The reasons to want to leave, I will tell you, were running out. The roof, for I went in the days after often, was a garden. In November. In Chicago. Heated stones underfoot and old fig trees in pots and a low pool of dark water that steamed in the cold. And when I climbed the last narrow stair, the entire skyline laid out for me like an offering. He was already there. He was sitting on a bench at the far end with his elbows on his knees and his head bent, the way men sit when they are trying not to be seen by themselves. He did not look up when I came. I did not mean to interrupt, I said. You're not. His voice was rougher than usual, as if he had been speaking to someone hard before me. Sit, I sat, not beside him, on the opposite end of the bench. The cold of the night came down through my hair and the heat of the stones came up through my soles, and I felt for a strange moment like a coin held between two fingers. Your mother, he said eventually. Yes. Tell me about her. It was not a request a man like him should have been able to make. I should have refused him. I told him instead. I told him about the way she had braided my hair on Sunday mornings, and the way she had hummed when she cooked, and the way she had, in the year before she died, started to leave doors open behind her, as if she had begun to forget that doors were a thing one closed. I told him about her laugh. I told him about her hands. I told him about the night she had not come home, and the morning the policeman had stood in our kitchen with his cap in his hands, and the silence in the apartment afterward, the silence that had become, in a way, my second mother. He listened. He did not interrupt. He did not, when I was done, say I am sorry the way people did who had not earned the right. He said instead, she used to put cinnamon in her coffee. I went still. She did, and she sang in the shower. Yes. And she had a small scar here. He touched his own hairline just at the temple, from a fall when she was 6. How do you know that? He looked at me. He looked at me, and the city behind him made a halo, and the smoke of his breath in the cold made a small temporary ghost between us, and he said, because she was the only person in my life, Eleanor, who ever told me the truth. I did not ask him what truth. I was afraid of the answer. We sat on the bench for an hour in the cold, neither of us speaking, and when I finally went down the narrow stair, I did not realize until I reached the warm hallway that at some point during that hour his coat, the long black one I had seen him wear into a meeting that morning, had been laid across my shoulders, and I did not remember him doing it. I held the coat to my face in the dark of my own bedroom. It smelled of him. I will not tell you how long I stood there. I will tell you only that when I finally laid the coat across the back of a chair, I lay down in my bed, and I did not sleep, and I thought, for the first time in my life, with my eyes wide open in the dark, about what it would be to be loved by a man who had decided, before he ever met me, that he was going to be careful. On the night of the first storm, two things happened that I would not, for a long time, be able to think of separately. The first was a phone call. I had been given a phone, a clean one, untraceable, he said, in the tone of a man for whom such a sentence was ordinary, and the only number programmed into it was his, and the only person who had its number was my aunt, who had been told that I had taken a live-in job with a wealthy family on the Gold Coast, and that I would visit her on Sundays. He drove me himself the first time. He waited in the car at the curb. He did not come in. My aunt watched him through the curtain and said, when I came back inside, that there was a man whose face she had seen before, only she could not remember where, and that she did not think she liked him, but that she did not think also that he was a bad man, and what a strange thing, she said, to feel both, and would I have tea? The phone that night rang. It was him. "Get to the panic room," he said. There was no preamble, there was no breath. "Marta will take you. Now, Eleanor, run." I ran. The second thing was the shooting. I learned afterward that it had been 6 men, that they had come up through the parking garage in a stolen van, that 2 of his men had died at the elevator and 3 more on the stairs, and that he had killed the last 2 himself with a gun I would, weeks later, find in a drawer of his study with a small dent in the grip from where, he said, when I asked, he had once dropped it on a stone floor at 15. I did not see any of this. I sat in a room behind 2 steel doors with Marta, who held my hand and whispered prayers in Polish, and the lights flickered once, and then the all-clear came, and the steel doors opened, and he was standing on the other side of them, and there was blood on his white shirt that was not his, and a cut on his eyebrow that was, and his eyes found me first, before they found anything else, before the men behind him could give him the report, before Marta could speak. And the look in them was not the look of a man who had just killed 2 strangers. It was the look of a man who had just remembered mid-fall that he had something to live for. "You are unharmed," he said. "Yes," I whispered. "Good," he said. And then his hand came up, slowly, the way you reach for a bird, and his thumb brushed once across my cheekbone, and that was the first time he had ever touched me. And when he lowered his hand, he stared at his own thumb a moment as if he did not recognize it, and then he turned and walked away down the hall to handle whatever a man like him handles after a thing like that. I stood in the doorway of the panic room and pressed my own hand to the place his thumb had been and discovered that I was shaking, and that I was not shaking from fear. The men who had died for me lay in the foyer for an hour before the cleaners came. I saw 2 of them. I had not meant to see them. I had walked, dazed, through the wrong corridor on my way back from the panic room, and there in the marble entryway were 2 men I had nodded to, 2 men who had said good morning to me, 2 men who would not say good morning to anyone again. One of them was a man named Anton. He had had a daughter. He had shown me her photograph the week before. She was 7. She had a missing front tooth. The cleaners came. The cleaners worked in a kind of professional silence I will never forget. I went to the kitchen. I sat at the counter where I had watched Dante pour his coffee 14 days before, and I did not cry, and I did not eat, and I sat there for 3 hours, and that is where he found me. He came in still in the shirt with the blood on it. He had not changed. He had not, I realized, even washed his hands. He sat across from me. He laid his hands on the counter, palms down where I could see them. He did not speak. He waited. I said, finally, "Anton had a daughter." "I know. She is 7. I know, I have already called her mother. I will go in the morning. I will not, Eleanor, take you with me. You should not have to see that. Will she be all right?" "She will not. She will in time be all right enough. I will see to it that she is. I will see to it that she goes to school. I will see to it that the house is paid for. I will see to it that her mother does not, 1 year from now, have to make a single phone call about money. I cannot give her father back. I can do those other things. I looked at him. I looked at the blood on his shirt. I looked at his hands on the counter. I looked at the way he was looking at me, steady and tired and waiting and not asking anything of me, not even that I forgive him for the world he had brought me into, and I said very softly, "Come here." He stood. He came around the counter. He stopped a step away from me. I stood from my stool. I closed the last step myself. I put my arms around him. I will tell you that he was very still for the first second, the way a man is still when he has not been held in a long time and does not, for that first second, know what to do with the heldness. And his arms came around me slowly, the way a man closes a door he is afraid will slam, and he laid his cheek against the top of my head, and he did not move, and I did not move, and we stood like that in his kitchen while the cleaners worked 4 corridors away, and when he finally spoke, his voice was so low I felt it more than I heard it. "Eleanor, yes, I would like to ask you something. Ask me. I would like to ask you," he said, "whether, when this is over, you might consider not leaving." I did not answer for a long time. When I did not lift my face from his shoulder. I said, "Whether what is over? All of it, the men in the elevator, the reasons they came, the thing that is not a debt that I have not told you yet, that is the real reason you are in this house. There is more. There is more. There is Eleanor, there is so much more, and I will tell you all of it. But I cannot tell you tonight, and I cannot tell you tomorrow, and I am asking you to wait, and I am asking you to wait without leaving, and I have no right to ask you that, and I am asking it anyway." I tightened my arms around him. "I will wait," I said. He held me a long time after. I do not know how long. I know that when he finally let me go, his eyes were wet, and that I pretended I had not seen, because there are dignities you allow a man like him, and that was one. I went to bed. He did not. I heard him, late, walking the halls of his own house, the way a man walks who is checking the locks for the 3rd time, and the 4th, and the 5th, because he has just discovered in the middle of his life that there is something inside the house worth more than the house. It was 3 days later that they took me. I had gone, with one of his men, a soft-spoken Pole named Janek, to my aunt's apartment to pick up a box of my mother's things she had been keeping for me in the back of a closet for 15 years. We were 3 blocks from home on the way back, on the bridge over the river, when the van came alongside. I did not see it. Janek saw it. Janek was the one who pulled me down into the footwell, and who said, in a voice that did not match his face, "Hold on, miss," and who took the first bullet through the driver's side window, and who, even with the bullet through his shoulder, kept driving, until they ran us off the bridge into the guardrail, and the car stopped and the van's door opened and there were 3 men. I will tell you what I remember. I remember Janek saying my name. I remember the cold of the bridge, railing through my coat. I remember a man I had never seen pulling me up by the elbow, and another saying, in Italian, "Hurry," and a third saying in English, "Get the bag also, the bag," and I remember thinking. And this is the strange part. This is the part I am ashamed of and not ashamed of. Both. I remember thinking very calmly that Dante was going to come, and that when he came, he was going to be very angry, and that I was going to be the reason, and that I was both terrified by this and, in some small, terrible place inside myself, pleased. They took me to a warehouse. It was not, as it turned out, far. They were not, as it turned out. Very good. I was tied to a chair for 1 hour and 17 minutes. I know because there was a clock on the wall. I watched it. They argued. They argued in a mixture of 3 languages, 2 of which I did not know, and the one I did know, Italian. They argued in the way men argue when they have realized, very late, that they have been hired by a person who has not paid them enough for what they have just done. Then the door came off the hinges. The door did not open. It came off the hinges. It came off because a man on the other side had decided that the hinges were optional, and the man on the other side was Dante, and behind him were 6 men, and what followed I will not narrate in detail because it was over very quickly, and because Dante had asked me after, never to tell anyone exactly what I had seen him do that night, and I have honored that request. I will tell you only this. He killed the 3 men. He did it himself, although his men would have done it for him. He did it the way a surgeon does a thing, not with rage, not with theater, but with a precision so total that I understood, watching him, that he had been here many times before, and that the only thing different about tonight was the chair I was tied to. When the room was quiet, he came to me. He knelt in front of the chair. He did not, at first, untie me. He took my face in his hands, both hands, very gently, as if my face were a thing that might come apart in his, and he looked at me, and his face was a face I had not seen before, a face I do not think anyone alive had seen before, and he said, "Eleanor, are you hurt?" "No. Are you sure?" "I am sure." "If you are not sure, you must tell me now, because in a moment I will untie you, and the moment after that I will not be able to think about anything except holding you, and I need to know now before I lose the ability to ask." "I am not hurt," I said. He closed his eyes. He pressed his forehead briefly against mine. He smelled of cordite and rain and the cedar that, by then, I had come to associate with him so completely that the smell of cedar in any other room of any other building would, for the rest of my life, make me look up and expect to see him. Then he untied me. He lifted me. He carried me out of the warehouse. He did not let me walk. I had not asked him to carry me, and he did not ask me, and I did not protest because I understood, in a way I had not before, that what was happening was not for me, was for him, was the only thing his body was capable of doing in that minute, which was the holding of the person who, he had just discovered, he was not going to be able to live without. He drove me home himself. He did not speak in the car. His hands on the wheel were white at the knuckles, and they did not loosen, not once, not for the entire ride, and at the elevator he carried me again, and at the door of the penthouse he set me down only because he had to enter the code. And the moment the door closed behind us, he turned to me and he said, and his voice was not steady. It was the first time, and the only time before our wedding, that I heard his voice not steady, "Eleanor, I am going to tell you the truth. I am going to tell you the truth tonight. I cannot wait any longer. I cannot do this again. I cannot drive across this city again to a warehouse not knowing if you are alive. Do you understand me?" "Yes." Sit down, please. I am going to bring you tea, and I am going to tell you the truth, and you are going to listen, and you are going to decide after what you want to do with me, with all of me. Do you understand?" "Yes." He brought tea. I sat on the couch in the library where I had sat on the first night. The light was different now. The room was different now. I was different now. He sat across from me. He set the tea on the table between us. He did not drink. He did not, for a long minute, even speak. Then he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and he began. "Your mother," he said, "saved my life when I was 16 years old. That is the first thing you need to understand. Everything I am about to tell you is built on that one fact, and if you do not believe that fact, none of the rest of it will make sense." He stayed leaned forward, his hands clasped, his eyes on mine, and his voice was steadier than I had ever heard it, which is to say that it was steady the way a man's voice is steady when the cost of it being unsteady is more than he can pay. I was 16. My father had a way of correcting his sons. I was the eldest. I got the most correcting. There was a night in the November of my 16th year when I left the house with a broken hand and no coat, and I walked, in a snow like the one outside this window, until I could not feel my feet, and I sat down in the doorway of a small bookshop in the old neighborhood because I could not anymore walk. The bookshop belonged to a young woman named Sophia. She was 22. She was even then the most, he paused. She was the kindest human being I had ever stood near. She opened the door of her shop. She brought me in. She did not call my father. She did not call the police. She bandaged my hand with a clean tea towel, and she made me cocoa, and she let me sleep on the cot in the back of her shop, and in the morning she fed me, and she said, "Dante, when you are a man, do not be your father. That was your mother. That was the woman she was at 22. Do you understand?" My throat was so tight I could not speak. He took it as an answer. I went home. I did not go back to her shop for a long time. I grew up. My father died, and I will tell you, Eleanor, because you will eventually ask, that I did not kill him, although I have killed for less. He died of a heart in a body that had abused itself for too long, and I did not mourn him, and I have never pretended I did. I did not become him in the ways that mattered. Your mother is the reason. Hers was the voice in my head when I was 25 and 28 and 31 and the worst nights of my life. I went looking for her again when I was 26. She had married by then. She had a daughter. She was happy. I did not introduce myself. I watched from across a street on a Sunday as she walked out of a church holding the hand of a small girl with brown hair. He turned his eyes, finally, to mine. "You," he said, "were the small girl with the brown hair." I made a sound. I do not know what kind of sound. "I went to her the year before she died. She had written me. She said she needed a friend who knew what the world was. She told me about your uncle, about the accounts, about the danger she was in. I told her I would handle it. She told me no, Dante, not yet, because if you handle my brother now, my daughter will grow up in a world that knows what your name means, and I want her to have a normal childhood. Wait, she said, until she has had a chance to be a girl. I waited. I waited 11 years, Eleanor. I have watched you, not the way you are imagining, not closely. There has been a man, a quiet one, a kind one, who has walked past your aunt's apartment 3 times a week for 11 years. There has been a woman at your high school graduation who clapped when your name was called and whom you never noticed. There has been, since you started at the coffee shop, a regular who comes in for an Americano on Tuesdays and over tips. They are mine. They have only ever been there to be sure no one took you before I could be ready. You said my father owed you $3 million. Your father owed me nothing. Your father was a small man with a small life, Eleanor, and he drank himself into a stairwell, as you know. I never met him. The folder was a fiction. It was a way to bring you here without telling you on the first night what I am telling you now. Why now? Because 4 weeks ago, he said, your uncle returned from Naples. I did not know I had an uncle in Naples. I did not, until that moment, know I had an uncle alive at all. Marcus Vance, he said. Your mother's older brother. He has spent the last 15 years in Italy because the inside of an American prison would not have suited him, and now he is back, because he has remembered, finally, that you are 23, and that the trust your grandfather set up for you matures on your 25th birthday, and that you have the keys to accounts that your mother died protecting from him. He is going to come for you. He has already begun. The men in the parking garage 3 nights ago were his. The men on the bridge tonight were his. He will not stop. He has been hearing outward. He has been spending money he does not have because he believes that if he can get you alone for 1 hour, he can make you sign a paper, and after that he will not need you alive. I think I made a sound. I think I said, my mother died of grief. He shook his head very slowly. Your mother was killed, Eleanor. She did not die of anything. She was killed by her brother in the kitchen of your aunt's apartment 4 days before the police told you it was a complication, and your aunt knows and has known, and has never told you because she promised your mother she would not, and because your aunt is a coward and a kind one, and they are not always different things. I sat on the leather chair in his library with my hands very cold and my face very hot, and I did the math of my life and watched it come out, finally, to a number I had never gotten before. There is a letter, he said more quietly. She wrote it before she died. It is in a reading room down the hall. I have not opened it. I have not been able to. It is yours when you are ready. It will tell you in her own hand what I have just told you in mine. I will not, Eleanor, ask you to take my word for any of it. I have lied to you about a folder. I have not lied to you about anything else, and I will not, but I understand if my word is not enough, and that is why the letter for 15 years has been waiting. You brought me here, I said, to protect me. Yes, from a man I did not know existed. Yes, and the debt. There is no debt. There has never been a debt. The folder is in the bottom drawer of this desk. You may burn it tonight if you wish. And the line. His eyes flickered. Which line? I will handle you in a way no one ever did, and you will crave me more. I could not finish it. I could not, in the saying of it, look at him. He did not look away from me. I meant it differently, he said, quietly, than I am sure it sounded. How? I meant, he said, that you have lived your whole life inside a lie that was told to you out of love, and that I had decided, the moment I saw you walk into this penthouse, that I would not lie to you again. I meant that I would handle the truth gently, the way no one in your life had handled it gently before, and that one day, when I had finished telling it to you, you would crave. He stopped. He took a breath. You would crave the having of it, of the truth, more than you craved the comfort of the lie. That is what I meant, Eleanor. I have meant nothing else by you from the first night but that, I swear it. I looked at him for a long time. You have loved me, I said. He did not flinch. He did not look away. I have loved your mother's daughter, he said, for 11 years. I did not allow myself to know what shape that love had taken until the night you walked through the door of this penthouse, and now I know, and now you know, and I will not press it on you, Eleanor. You may walk out of this house tonight if you wish. There is a car. There is an account. There is a place in Maine where the woman who used to clean for my mother lives, and she has a small cottage by the sea and is expecting you if you wish to come. You are not my prisoner. You have not been my prisoner for a single hour since you arrived. Do you understand? I did. I understood perfectly. I stood up. I crossed the room. I stopped in front of him. He was a head taller than me. He smelled like cedar and rain. The cut at his eyebrow had healed to a thin pink line, and the snow outside was making the city soft, and I had been told the truth tonight for the first time in 14 years, and I had not somehow broken. I reached up. I touched his face. I touched the scar at his collar, the long one, the one that ran into his shirt, and his breath hitched, the way a man's breath hitches when he has not been touched kindly in a very long time. "I am not leaving," I said. He closed his eyes. "Eleanor, I am not leaving," I said again. "But you are going to tell me, Dante, every single thing you know about my uncle, and then we are going to decide together what we are going to do about him." We did not sleep. We sat in his study and he told me. He told me my uncle had come into the country through Toronto, that he was, at this moment, in a hotel suite in River North under a name on a Maltese passport. He told me my uncle had met in the past 3 weeks with 2 of the 4 old families that had lost men in the parking garage. He told me my uncle had hired a lawyer to begin, on Monday, the process of contesting the trust on the grounds that I was incompetent, a process that would not ultimately succeed, but would, in the meantime, freeze the accounts and keep them out of my reach for at least a year, during which year my uncle planned, very simply, to have me killed. He cannot inherit if I am alive. He cannot inherit if you are alive. And if I am not, then everything goes to him as next of kin. Your aunt is not blood, there is no one else. Then we kill him first. Dante looked at me a long, level moment. He did not, I will say this for him, pretend to be shocked. "That is one option," he said slowly. "Eleanor, listen to me. I will do it if you ask. I want you to understand that. There is nothing I will not do if you ask. But I am going to ask you to think for one more night before you ask. Because the woman who walked out of that coffee shop 2 months ago is not a woman who has ever had blood on her hands, and I do not want to be the man who put it there. And because, and you may laugh at this, Eleanor, but I will say it anyway, because I would like, very much, to one day be married to a woman who can sleep through the night, and that is not a small thing, and it is not a thing I would have understood about myself a year ago, and it is the kind of thing that a man learns only when he meets the woman he wants to marry." I did not laugh. I thought all night. The fire burned down. He brought me tea at 3 in the morning. He did not sit beside me. He sat across, in the chair he had sat in the first night, and he watched me think with the patience of a man who had waited 11 years and could wait a little longer. At one point, around 4, I stood up and walked the length of the room. He watched me walk. I stopped at the window. I put my hand against the glass. The cold of it ran up my arm into my chest. I thought of my mother. I thought of her in the kitchen with her brother. I thought of what she would tell me to do, and I did not have to think hard, because she was, in the end, my mother, and I had known her, and I knew what she would say. At dawn, a gray, low dawn, the kind that does not so much arrive as leaking around the edges of the curtains, I said, "I want to see him. Eleanor, I want to see him, Dante. I want him to look at my face. I want him to know that I know what he did. I want him to see before whatever happens, that he failed. That my mother won. I want that, and I want it from him, and I will not be talked out of it." He looked at me a long time. He nodded once. "Then I will arrange it, and you will be there. Yes, and you will not act unless I say so. No, promise me. Eleanor." His voice cracked then, for the first and only time I ever heard it crack outside of a wedding day. "I have promised your mother every day for 11 years. I am going to promise you now. I will not act unless you say. And if you say, I will act fully, and there will be nothing of him left to come back. Choose carefully, I will follow." I nodded. He stood. He came around the desk. He stopped in front of me, and he reached down, and he took my hand, and he kissed the knuckles of it once briefly with a tenderness that did not belong in a man who had killed 3 strangers in a warehouse the night before, and he said, "I am yours. I will be until you tell me otherwise. Now go and sleep." I went. I did not sleep, but I lay, for the first time in my life, in a bed that felt like home. The meeting was set for the following Sunday at 4 o'clock at a restaurant on the edge of the river that had once been my grandfather's and was now, in the polite legal fictions of the city, owned by a holding company in Delaware. The restaurant was closed for a private event. The private event was me. I wore a dress my mother would have liked. It was navy. It was simple. It buttoned to the throat. Dante had not chosen it. I had. I did not, that morning, want anything I wore to be anyone's choice but mine. He drove. He drove himself, no driver, no escort, and the only men in the restaurant when we walked in were the two who had been at the windows of Roseline Coffee on the night of the storm. They nodded to me. They did not nod to him. They had always nodded to him. They had decided, somewhere in the last 72 hours, that I was a person to be nodded to also, and I will not pretend that I did not feel the small, strange weight of it. My uncle was already at the table. He stood when I came in. He was in his 50s. And the resemblance to my mother was so cruel I had to stop briefly in the doorway. He had her cheekbones. He had her brow. He had the same small upturn at the corner of the mouth that on her had been kindness, and that on him was a thing that had been worn into a different shape by a different life. "Eleanor," he said. He held out his arms as if he expected an embrace. He did not get one. I sat. Dante sat beside me. "We have not been introduced," I said. "Marcus." He sat. "Your mother's brother. I know who you are." A small, careful expression moved across his face. He looked briefly at Dante. Dante did not look at him. Dante was looking at me. He had, since I had walked into the restaurant, looked at no one but me. "I see," my uncle said finally, "that I have been beaten to the introduction." "You have been beaten to a number of things," I said. He laughed. It was my mother's laugh, played back at the wrong speed. "Eleanor," he said, "whatever Mr. Marchetti has told you about me, and I am sure it has been a great deal, I would ask you to consider the source. He has reasons of his own to want you in his hand. He is not a friend of this family. He is the only friend my mother had." His face hardened. He lost the laugh. "Your mother," he said, "was a sentimental woman. She made decisions with her heart. I made decisions with my head, and the result is that I am sitting at a table 40 years after the death of my father with a niece who has been told a very particular version of, 'You killed her,'" I said. The words came out of me without permission. They came out flat, the way a stone comes out of a sling. He went still. The restaurant was very quiet. The two men at the windows did not move. Dante did not move. I did not move. He did not move. "Eleanor," he said softly, "I do not know what you have been told. She wrote me a letter," I said. "Did you know that? She wrote a letter before she died and gave it to a friend, and the letter has been in a reading room in Mr. Marchetti's house for 15 years, and I read it on Wednesday morning. She named you, in her own hand, on 3 pages. My mother's handwriting, Marcus, nomming you. So when you tell me that I am being told a version of events, I would like you to understand that I am being told it by my mother, from beyond her own death in her own hand, and I do not require any other source." His face did several things very quickly. Then it settled, and he looked at me with my mother's eyes, and he said, in a voice with no warmth at all, "Then you understand the position you are in." "Yes." "Then you understand that the keys to those accounts will, one way or another, be coming back to me." "I understand that you would like to think so." "Eleanor." His voice was patient now. It was Uncle Patient. "I am not without resources. I have men. I have lawyers. I have history. You have, from what I can see, a single Marchetti and a coffee shop apron. If we walk out of this restaurant without an arrangement, we walk into a war you are not equipped to fight, and you will not survive it." "I have something else," I said. "Oh, I have my mother's letter," I said. "And I have an attorney, Mr. Marchetti's attorney, in fact, who has been on retainer for me since Wednesday afternoon. And I have, as of this morning, filed an affidavit with the federal government in which my mother's letter is Exhibit A, in which Exhibit B is a sworn deposition by my Aunt Margaret detailing the events of the night of October 11th, 15 years ago, and in which Exhibit C is a list of 7 witnesses your associates believed had been silenced, and who, it turns out, were merely paid and have been relocated in the past 48 hours and are willing to testify. The affidavit is sealed. It will remain sealed for as long as I am alive and well. If I am not alive and well, if I, for example, fall down a stairwell in the manner of my father, the affidavit unseals automatically and is forwarded to the office of the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois at 9 o'clock the following Monday morning. You do not need to kill me, Marcus, to lose. You merely need to allow me to die. His face, there is no kind way to describe his face. It went the color of paper. Dante, beside me, had not moved. He had not, in the entire conversation, said one word. He merely watched my uncle, the way a wolf watches a thing that has not yet realized it is no longer the predator. I leaned forward. "I am going to tell you what is going to happen," I said. "You are going to leave this country tonight. You are going to leave on a flight Mr. Marchetti has booked for you, and you are going to land in a country with no extradition treaty, and you are going to spend the rest of your natural life there. You will not contest the trust. You will not contact me. You will not contact my aunt. You will not, in any manner direct or indirect, set foot on American soil for as long as you live. And in exchange for these courtesies, the affidavit will remain sealed and you will live out a life which is, frankly, more mercy than my mother got from you. Do you understand? He did not answer. Marcus, I said. Yes. Yes, what? I understand. Stand up. The car is waiting. There are 2 men at the door who are going to walk you to it. He stood. He looked for a moment at Dante, and Dante, for the first time, spoke. If you are ever within 500 miles of her again, Marcus, the affidavit will not be the thing that finds you. I will. Do you understand also? Yes, my uncle whispered. He left. The restaurant door closed behind him. The 2 men at the windows did not look at him as he passed. I sat at the table for a long moment, and I was not crying, and I was not shaking, and I was not anything. I was empty in the clean way a glass is empty after it has been finally rinsed of something it has been holding for years. Dante watched me. He did not touch me. He did not, until I asked, do anything but watch me. Did I do it right? I whispered, finally. Eleanor, he said, and his voice was the rough kind again. Your mother would have been proud of you in a way she would never have known the words for. I started to cry then. I cried the way you cry when something you have been carrying for 14 years finally is set down on the floor. And he came around the table, and he sat beside me on the bench seat, and he did not put his arm around me, but he laid his hand on the table near mine, palm up, like an offering. And after a long time I put my hand in his, and he closed his fingers around mine, gently, and we sat like that until the snow outside the window of my grandfather's old restaurant stopped falling. He drove me home. He did not speak. At the door of the penthouse he stopped. He turned to me. He took my face in his hands. He kissed me then, for the first time, not on the mouth, but on the forehead, the way a man kisses a woman whose forehead he has been waiting 11 years to kiss. And he held his lips there for the length of one long breath, and when he pulled away his eyes were closed, and he said, very softly, in Italian, a word I did not know but which I would learn meant home, and he opened the door and we went in. There is no good way to end a story like ours, because stories like ours do not end. They merely, after a while, slow into a kind of life. My uncle landed in a country with no extradition treaty. He died there 6 years later of, if you can believe it, complications of the flu. I did not attend a funeral. I did not send flowers. I have not, since that day in my grandfather's old restaurant, said his name aloud. The trust matured on my 25th birthday. The accounts came home. I did with the money what my mother would have done. I gave most of it away, in pieces small enough that the giving lasted years, and the rest I put into a foundation in her name, which now runs a small bookshop on the south side of the city, with a cot in the back, in case any 16-year-old boy ever again needs a place to sleep. Dante did not propose. He has never been a man for theater. He came to me on the morning of my 24th birthday in the kitchen of the penthouse, for I was still living in the penthouse, by then, in a room of my own that had over time stopped being a guest room and started being simply mine, and he set a small box on the counter beside the coffee, and he said, I have carried this in my pocket for 141 days. I am tired of it. Either take it, Eleanor, or put it in a drawer, and I will not mention it again. I opened the box. The ring inside had been his mother's. I knew because I had read about it in a letter I had sorted on a rug in a room upstairs 3 years before. I put it on. I did not say yes. I did not need to. He did not, when I put it on, smile broadly. He smiled small. He smiled the way a man smiles who has come home, finally, to a house with open doors. We were married in the spring, in a small ceremony in the rooftop garden, by a judge who had once owed his career to my grandfather, and who, when my mother had died, had cried in his chambers in a way I only learned about decades later. My aunt was there. She wore a hat that was too large. She cried through the entire ceremony, and afterwards she took Dante aside, and she said something to him I have never asked about, and he listened, with his head bent the way he bends his head only for a very small number of women, and then he kissed her cheek, and she patted his arm, and that was, I think, the only forgiveness either of them was ever going to get for the long, careful silences of my childhood, and it was enough. The bookshop on the south side does well. The foundation gives away a great deal of money. The penthouse is still the penthouse, but the doors are open now, and the rooms are mostly unlocked, and the room at the end of the East Hall, the one that was locked, the first night, the one I never asked about, turned out to be a nursery. It had been built by his mother before she died, for a grandchild she did not live to see. He had not been able to open the door of it for 13 years. He opened it eventually for me. There is a child now. She is 2. Her name is Sophia. She has the hair of her father and the eyes of a grandmother she will know only in stories, and her godmother is my aunt, who is teaching her, from her small high chair, to put cinnamon in coffee. Sometimes, when she is asleep, Dante stands in the doorway of her room, and he watches her sleep, and his face does the thing his face did the night I told him I was not leaving, the thing where the long-held weight comes down off the shoulders, and the man, for a moment, is just a man. He thinks I do not see him do this. I see him do it every time. There is one thing I have not told you. I have saved it for the end because it is the kind of thing you save. He told me once, very late, in the early hours of a morning when neither of us could sleep, that the line he had said to me on the first night, the one about handling, the one about craving, was not the line he had actually said. It was the line I had remembered him saying. We sat with that in the dark for a long time before he went on, because what he had actually said, he told me, was not handle. It was hold. He had said, I will hold you in a way no one ever did, Eleanor. And it was not crave. It was trust. He had said, and you will trust me more than the life you came from. He had said the soft words. I had heard the hard ones. I had carried, for years, a sentence in my head that he had never spoken, and he had been too proud or too careful or too in love to correct me, because, he said, in the dark, his voice the rough kind, the kind I had only ever heard in 3 or 4 of the rooms of our marriage. Because the night I walked into the penthouse, he had decided that whatever I needed to hear in order to stay was what he had said, and he had let the sentence I had heard live inside me all those weeks. Because the sentence I had heard was the one that had kept me in the room long enough to hear the truer one. The truer one was that he was going to hold me. The truer one was that I was going to trust him. The truer one was that no one had ever done either for me in my whole life, and that he had known it from across a street on a Sunday in 2014, and he had been patient ever since. I looked at him in the dark. I touched the scar at his collar, the one that runs from beneath his ear into his shirt, the one I have, by now, kissed more times than I have not, and I told him, Dante, then I have been craving the wrong sentence for years. He did not laugh. He did not need to. He said, Eleanor, I have been hoping you would crave them both. I closed my eyes. He pulled me to him. He held me in the dark without speaking for a long time. Outside, the city was throwing up its slow gold light. The snow was falling, the way it had fallen on the night I walked into the penthouse for the first time, the way it had fallen on the night a 16-year-old boy with a broken hand had sat down in the doorway of a small bookshop 40 years before. The snow, in this city, falls always. It falls on the just and the unjust. It falls on bookshops and penthouses and grandfathers' restaurants and stairwells where small men have died of small lives. It falls on women who have been told the truth, and on the men who have told it to them, and on children who will, one day, ask their mothers how their mothers met, and be told, in the long, unhurried way that only mothers can tell things, the whole of it. The whole of it. From the bell above the door at 11:47 p.m., to the man with the broken hand in the doorway of a bookshop in 1986, to the ring on the kitchen counter on a winter morning, to the doorway of a nursery, in a house with open doors, where a man stands and watches his daughter sleep, and is not afraid. The line he said to me the first time was the wrong one. The line he meant has taken me a lifetime to understand. He has held me in a way no one ever did. And I have trusted him and craved him and loved him more than the life I came from. That is how I will tell her when she asks. That is how, in the end, I am telling you.